So I'm Nelleke Beltjens for the 3 times. I'm 3 times Nelleke Beltjens. And I'm from the Netherlands. If you don't know where that is, it's a tiny country. It's bordering Germany and Belgium. And then with a little water in between, we have the UK there. So, which is interesting language-wise, because the Dutch always have to switch languages because nobody speaks Dutch, except for in South Africa. They speak a kind of Dutch, I would say. It's like the old Dutch. Okay, I should make this not too long. So today I'm gonna show a few images of my work. And I'm not gonna explain my work because I think that's impossible, but I'm gonna talk about some of my interests. And from those interests, I make my work, but actually, maybe it's even the other way around. Like you make your work, and if it goes really well, it comes from here, and the thinking comes after. And then you start to relate these things. So in a sense, I make my work, but I really learn from making my work. It's like my biggest teacher in life is my own work, because it comes from more of an intuitive space at best. And then later I'm starting to look at it, and I'm like, wow, you know, it's like, if anything, it's related to life and to learn what life is and who am I in this universe. And so questions I ask myself and that I'm interested in is like, or things I'm interested in is, for example, the intrinsically interrelatedness of everything. It's like nothing stands by itself. So if I move one thing, or even if I think a thought, it's doing something, it will get manifested. And if more and more people think that same thought, it actually will be actualized and become a thing, and it will become materialized. So, and so in my work, I think my works exhibit this interrelatedness, and how I do that is I always work in series, so I make multiple pieces at once, and I create these worlds. I call them worlds or universes, and what I do then, I start cutting out parts. This is a close-up. And still, it's hard to see the cuts, but it has a lot of cutouts. Later, I'll show a little video to show it to you. So I create these worlds with watercolor. It's all see-through materials. There's no going back. There's no mistakes are there. I just have to, whatever mistake is, I have to work with it. I can only go with it. And for me, that's, again, it's like, it's related to life. There's nothing you can take back. You have to go with what's there. And so what I do is start cutting out parts of one piece, and I start exchanging it with another. So they have all parts from each other and are intrinsically interrelated, literally. So I sculpt my drawings. I'm not just drawing, or I call them drawings because they're on paper, but I'm really sculpting my drawings and painting. So if you know how to call these, please tell me. I don't know, but they're works on paper. So this is of the same series, this piece, and it's called The Only Constant is Change. I guess that doesn't need a lot of explanation, because I think there's nothing stable. And it's interesting because often people want stability in their lives, but actually it doesn't exist. I think there is only dynamic balance, what I would call, and that's another title of another series of mine. This is a piece, she's going faster. Okay, so this is called Permeable Boundaries. I hope I say that word correct. Permeable, it's like, you know, see-through. Is it correct? Okay. So I was thinking, I'm thinking a lot about consciousness and what consciousness is and the different levels of consciousness, and that actually how we experience things is because we have a certain consciousness. This thing is solid, but only because I have a certain consciousness to perceive this as solid. If I was in another level of consciousness, or if I was on another level of a frequency level, I wouldn't perceive this as solid. I would perceive you would be different, you know. But we have these boundaries. It's like a boundary between me and the stand, me and you. So we think it's different, but in a sense, like humanity is one consciousness, and that's why it's just completely insane that we're still killing each other. And just, she's moving on. Because basically, when you're bad to another person, you're bad to yourself, because it's one thing, it's all one thing. It's totally fascinating. So these are things I'm thinking about. And now I think she's going to show a video. There's no sound. I just thought it would be interesting because my work is so detailed. And if you don't see it in real, it's hard to see the cutouts. So I made a little video. It's nothing, not a professional thing, but you can see how I cut parts out. And then I exchange them. But just to give an idea, you can see it here. So, and for me, like each cut is a possibility. It's a possibility for something new that can start to exist. So it's pretty drastic because there's no way back. A cut is a cut. So, and then also, when I want to move one piece to another, I necessarily have to move another piece back to the previous piece. So it's again to come back to everything is related and nothing moves by itself. If you do one thing, consequently, there's always something else that moves or changes. And the other thing that I'm very interested in this, in this way of working is each cut is always the first cut. Even when I talk about, and it'll be like uncountable cuts at some point, but it's always, I do one cut, and my whole piece changed. So I have to constantly look at it like a new thing. And I think it's like, that's kind of what we need to do with life every day, is kind of look at it. You did something, and it's something else. And we, like, what is presenting now to make the next cut? So I always say there is no 10th cut, there is only the first cut. And then again, there is the first cut, and then there is the first cut. And it's always happening in the now. And so I'm interested in this complexity, also that in my work, but also in life, that it's so complex, and everything is happening at once and always in the now. Because when I meet you, I'm meeting you now, but when I meet you in 10 years, 10 years that's an idea, it's a construct, it's not true. But when I meet you in 10 years, when we're all sitting here again, it's the now again. So there's nothing else. So I'm totally fascinated about these kinds of things. So this piece, it's called Renewal. It went through so many changes making this, with cutting and exchanging between other pieces. Like I said, it's hard to see the cuts, but normally when it's a studio visit, I hold up my paper and you can see all because I tape it on the back. It's not collage. I literally cut holes in it and tape it on the back. This piece is called Infinity, and it has, when you see in the middle, like the lemnis cat, do you call it like that in English? Like the ongoing sign, there's never an ending. And this piece, piece is called Dynamic Balance, and mentioned that earlier, and it's like the idea that balance, again, it's not something stable, but to be balanced means to be flexible and to be able to move back and forth when things are happening. It's like the yin and yang principle. It's it's in food, it's in everything. It's how it works on the planet. So I'm interested, and when I'm working on the piece, at some point it's completely out of balance. So, but then I keep going and going till there is a complexity that is coherent. So not a complexity like in difficulty, like we call often a person that, when a person is complex, you're talking about a difficult person often. But what I mean is a complexity in coherence. So it all comes together in its own complexity. And then this is a piece, it's a large work. It's kind of like my size. And it's called Suns and Moons of All Times, because I like to, that's why the spheres come in my work. I like to kind of show that it's not just about us on this planet, but it goes much further. It's like it's all the other planets, and it's the suns and the moons and everything that has been coming and going over time. It's just we have we're like day flights in the bigger scheme of the cosmos, of course. So we don't see that, but it's so large, it's not comprehensible, really. But so this piece was framed and was hanging actually in some kind of, it was funny, it was hanging in a castle in Germany, and the castle had like completely, it's really old, and all the floors were crooked and the walls were like all like weird angles, so we decided to still hang it with a level, but that meant that the whole building looked straight, except my work looked crooked. You know, it's just like, what do you go with? Again, like perception. So,
Nelleke, you'll have time for 2 questions.
Okay. Questions? You don't have to, but you can.
I have a question. So one thing that's really interesting about your talk is about your process and being in the now.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a deep sense, both in the video as well as the stills you've shown, of a sense of time.
Mm-hmm.
And so can you talk a bit about like temporality, because like, and also spatiality, because the work, when I've seen it, takes on some 3-dimensional levels.
Mm-hmm.
And so it gives a sense of physically, of giving a sense of the passage of time through those cuts and layers. So I was wondering if you could talk a bit about how you think about time in your work, and if you could talk a bit about how that might get visually represented spatially, if that is a way you think about the work at all.
Well, it's an interesting question in a sense that I've been busy with space and time and consciousness. But first of all, to come back to the time, it's very time consuming, whatever time is, if time even exists. And it's like just every step, I always say, like, it's like climbing a mountain, because every step I have to do, it's like, because the piece changes so much with each little thing I do, every step is so important. But now to come back to that question, because it's fascinating, because I was listening to this person, his name is Donald Hoffman, a scientist, but also a lot of Eastern philosophy goes by this idea that consciousness is fundamental. Space and time is not fundamental. Space and time is, again, it's a construct because of the consciousness that we live in. So in that sense, it's like, yes, there's a time, in a way there's a time and space element in my work, and I like it also. I like the illusion of movement in there. That's why I make these swoops, these fast gestures also. But at the same time, I don't believe time and space in that sense, in the truest sense, even exist, except in our way of viewing with our consciousness that we're living in on this planet, if that's an answer.
That is an answer, thank you.
Long answer.
You're good. Any other questions?
How about the role of color? I primarily see blues and yellows, but the role of color in the process.
It depends on, like, I'm a traveler. I'm kind of a nomad. I live like my work. I like to displace myself and then see how that works again in this other environment. So it's like, it's really like, so, and then where I am, often the color changes. And sometimes it's as simple. I was talking to TC about this. Sometimes things happen that seem like terrible or an accident, and you're like, oh no. And then it turns out, I think that's why you have to always keep your eyes, like your consciousness, your eyes open when things happen that you don't like. I was talking to TC about it, and actually before Suns and Moons of All Times, this series, I was very careful with using kind of dominant, like bright colors. But I went to UCross in 2001, and it was during the pandemic, and it took me 3 days to get there. It was just completely insane. They flew me to the wrong city, and I had to wait at the airport for 7 hours, and blah, blah. So I got there with my hand luggage, and my winter coat was still in the suitcase, but also all my colors, all my art materials were still in Amsterdam, and I was at UCross without anything, just my paper that I ordered. So what we did is, I asked the driver, like, can we stop by a store? And it was like an Ace hardware store. There's a small section with paint. And I had to just, people were waiting, so I picked out my paints really fast. Normally I research, but I picked them out. So I had all these colors, and I started to paint with them. And it was so bright, I was almost in shock. Just like, and then but it's kind of, I feel like that's not getting my suitcase was my biggest gift, because otherwise I would have been I would never have been so bold to just start using these colors. And I feel like maybe it would have taken me a year to get to that place if I had gotten my suitcase, but because I didn't have that, I was forced into something else, and then it can be the best thing that can happen to you is when things go wrong. Thank you.